You would think that in America, where the average person across the entire country spends around 55 hours a year just in traffic, and that's the average throughout the country. In some places like Chicago, it goes as high as around 155 hours a year being in traffic. With numbers like that, you would think people, local governments, the state governments, and the Fed would consider, alternate ways of getting around instead of doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. And that's breathing life into car dependency. And the response of many Americans to ending car dependency, it's manic. It's like it borders on the way the sandworms act in Dune whenever they hear a thumper. They just go crazy because to them, it is a threat to their freedom. Keep in mind, when people say we want to end car dependency, it doesn't mean we want to get rid of cars altogether. It just means we want alternate ways of getting around, which would benefit people that still drove because there would be less people on the road. And people bringing up anything that is not this, being somehow against freedom, is one of the most common arguments I get in my comment section, whether it be YouTube, TikTok, or Instagram. And forgive me, but I fail to see how spending on average with $8,000 a year, which is what the average American spends a year on a car, I fail to see how spending that much on a metal box that's going to sit there the majority of the time is in any way freedom. I fail to see how having options of getting around is somehow a threat to freedom. And that $8,000 a year figure, I think, is really important because something like around 50% of Americans don't even have $500 in their bank account to pay for an unexpected bill. Around 70% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck in this country. What about economic freedom? If there was reliable public transit or bike lanes, alternate ways of getting around, even walkable cities in America, people would have to spend significantly less on transportation, which would benefit everyone. Because taking public transit is extremely cheap. And that money that people would all of a sudden have in their pockets they could use to spend locally. And a lot of that money that they have and that they spend locally would stay local. Meaning that there'd be more money to fix our crumbling infrastructure, to have better parks, to have more livable cities. Not to mention the traffic thing again, there would be less traffic, and being in traffic is also expensive for people that are in traffic because your car is just running and it's idle. Another very common argument I see against ending car dependency, having more trains, bike lanes, is well, then the government will dictate where you're allowed to go. Who the hell do you think built all the roads? Huh? Who do you think decided where the roads go? Huh? Like, I don't know if it's the lead poisoning from, our terrible infrastructure that we built in the past. I don't know if it's the fumes that we breathe in from just being in traffic. I don't know if it's the chemicals in our food I don't know what has just turned people's brains into mush. But these brain dead and arguments are just getting insane. As humans, we're supposed to, have consciousness. So we're supposed to be able to think for ourselves, not be parrots of the auto industry. And another thing that is just absolutely brain dead and just shows a lack of just historical knowledge that Americans have despite of their own country, despite coming to be so patriotic. People say that America's too big for public transit. Dude, look at any city back in the 1950s, before car dependency just became rampant in America. There were tram lines everywhere. This is Los Angeles before the auto lobby and the tire industry just destroyed it. These were the Los Angeles streetcar lines, and these are streetcars. I'm not even saying that we should have streetcars everywhere, but we had them back then. We could have them now. Los Angeles is one of the most car dependent places in the United States, and has always been that way, even when this was a thing. Now, of course, streetcars, light rail trams, they should not be the end all be all. After all, being at grade, they can't exactly take advantage of their full speed potential, which I think on average is around 50 miles an hour. But when they're at grade, at street level, around other vehicles, around pedestrians, they only travel on average around 10, 15 miles an hour. So that's where metros come into play. And the sprawl that American cities are known for would mean basically nothing with rapid transit. This isn't the 30s and 40s anymore. Look at China. In China, they have the Guangzhou Metro. There's a train line that goes 100 miles per hour. That's around like 1 mile every 40 seconds. And that actually kind of ties into another argument that comes up, and that's how are we going to pay for it? Well, one, these don't pay for themselves, but also that's where the federal government comes into play. You know, there is socialism for the rich in this country, rugged individualism for the poor. That needs to change. One, public transit should not be for profit at all. It is a societal need, just like roads and highways and stuff. And using the federal government is actually really important when it comes to building transit, because they have control of the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve can credit any account with whatever amount of money is needed to pay for something. And in this case, it'd be public transit and other infrastructure projects. Basically, it's printing money, which doesn't matter because it doesn't cause inflation. What causes inflation is the lack of resources for people to purchase with the new money that is in circulation. In short, you could pay for these public transit projects as well as other infrastructure projects without needing to raise taxes at all. Like, I'm not a Malthusian by any chance. If you don't know what a Malthusian is, basically it's like it's a person that basically believes in population control. Because they're like, oh, at any moment we're just gonna run out of resources to feed our growing population, when we're like nowhere near that. And there's also like basically an infinite amount of resources in our solar system. So population doesn't really matter. Now, I bring up Malthusianism to qualify what I'm about to say. The population of the United States by the year, I think 2100, is expected to be around 400 million, or a little over 400 million. Think of another 70 million people on our streets. It is going to be madness if we don't have alternate ways of getting around other than a metal box. And if you think, oh, well, you know, trains, they get crowded too. Okay, yeah. Looking at places like Tokyo, China, or any other place with great public transit, should be like, wow, turns out a lot of people do want to use it. But also, we should take that into account and build for the future. We should have our stations much larger so that way it can accommodate more trains. Because unlike cars, one more lane doesn't really do much, because the average car lane only moves around 2,000 people an hour. One train car can fit around 100 people comfortably. Again, a little goes a long way. But I don't know, this video is getting kind of long again. Subscribe, like if you enjoyed. I'm also gonna do a Patreon, so look out for that. And yeah, I appreciate it.